Almighty God, we ask that you give us wisdom in the decisions we make here today, and give us guidance in working with our regional communities to promote the social, economic, environmental, and cultural well-being.
Amen. Can I remind all present here today, staff, members of the public and councillors, that this meeting has been live streamed and recorded, and that the recording will be posted on the Bay of Plenty website at the conclusion of the meeting. Accordingly, can I also remind everybody that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the course of this meeting that may be subsequently challenged in the court of law and found to be slanderous. We have apologies. An apology has been received from Councillor Matimoana McDonald. I move be sustained. Councillor Rose, all in favour say aye. Against, carried. Public forum, there is no public forum. Items not on the agenda. Following the conclusion of the open part of, following the conclusion of the public excluded, or maybe beforehand at the conclusion of the public, there is the opportunity for valedictory speeches by retiring councillors and confirmation of the public excluded council minutes of the 13th of September were also appended but not on the agenda. Order of business, there's no change to the order of business, but we do have a fixed time presentation from Keysight Holdings at 10 a.m. Mr. Winters. Thank you, Mr. Winters.
I think that's mentioned as part of the chairman's.
Yeah, we'll deal with that in the chairman's report as a late item on the chairman's report. I'll call for any declarations of conflict of interest. Mr. Crosby.
9.4 Keysight.
Yes, Mr. White, in terms of the Keysight presentation. Public excluded business to be transferred into the open. There is none. Right, we move to a substantial numbers of minutes to be endorsed. So item 8, Regional Council minutes of the 11th of August. I'll move. Councillor White second. All those in favour say aye. Against, carry. Any matters arising? Councillor Nees.
Report back on the strategic direction of BOPLAS, which was to come to this meeting, and also the initiatives that are being explored on the waste work stream that we asked for information on. I just wonder when we will receive that, please.
Chief Executive.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, councillors. There is a strategic day for BOPLAS on Friday, Councillor Nees, that will come to the meeting, the first meeting of the new council.
Anything else? If not, we'll move through 8.3. So minutes to be received. First minute, Te Marua Kaituna River Authority minutes of the 20th of May. We have a mover. Councillor Nees, seconder. Councillor Thurston. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Te Uapu Papamoa Hills Cultural Heritage Regional Park minutes of the 31st of May. Councillor Brunning. Councillor Nees, all those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Rangataiki River Forum minutes of the 3rd of June. Moved Councillor Clark and Councillor Eatey. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Tauranga Moana Advisory Group of the 17th of June. Councillor Nees and Councillor Brunning. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Regional Transport Committee minutes of the 19th. Councillor Nees.
Sorry, just a matter arising. I just
Yes.
wanted to highlight for members to look at page 61. There's some very useful commentary there from Mr. Chris Battersall, Professor Chris Battersall, on the health of Tauranga Moana. And I think if people haven't actually had a look at it, it's well worth reading that because it's very relevant. Thank you.
Councillor Nees. Regional Transport Committee minutes, the 19th of May. Mr.
Chair, happy to move these, noting that they are pretty historic, the 19th of May, and there was a subsequent meeting in recent days, but happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston. I'll second. All those in favour say aye. Against, carry. Oheba Harbour Implementation Forum of the 26th of April. Mr. Eady, thank you. Mr. Clark, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Minutes to be confirmed, continued. Regional Council minutes of the 13th of September. I'll move. Seconded, Councillor Winters. Any matters arising before I put it? Councillor Nees.
Beg your pardon, have we flipped past the Regional Transport Committee?
Long time ago.
Oh, I beg your pardon, I was making a note. There is a correction to those minutes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, can we revert back to that, Councillor Nees?
Certainly.
Correction, matters
on
arising.
Page 74, it should read Transport Emissions Reduction Plan, in brackets TERP, not Transport Reduction Plan, which is not what we intended. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll note those amendments. So Regional Council minutes, the 13th of September. I've moved. Do we have a second? Seconded, Councillor Crosby. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Any matters arising? If not, that takes us through to the reports. Item 9 on the agenda. The first item in terms of the agenda is the Chairperson's report. Can I say, as raised by Councillor Winters, I'm pleased to inform the Council that in agreement with Fiona as the Chief Executive and and as directed by the Council, the 22-23 Chief Executives Performance Agreement has been approved by the Executive Employment Committee. This document is available for councillors to view on Diligent under the Chief Executive's Employment folder.
Happy to move, Mr.
Happy to
Chairman.
move.
Being
Thank you,
received.
Councillor Winters. Councillor White, seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Any questions on that, councillors? No. Thank you very much. Adoption 9.2 of the Bay of Plenty Regional Public Transport Plan.
Your report, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry?
Your chair's
Oh,
report.
sorry, yes. Got to be quick.
You're going flat out. Just when we met with the Riverside Drive residents of Whakatane to discuss flood management,
Yes.
stop banks, yourself, Fiona and I, we've subsequently sent a lot of correspondence back to them, and we've had that operations and monitoring meeting commenting about the stop bank. Have we received any further correspondence back from the Riverside Drive residents?
So as recently as, what's today? Thursday. As recently as Tuesday, was it? As recently as Tuesday, the Riverside residents were present in the public at the councillors, regional council election candidate meetings. And in the social part of that meeting, they raised some issues with me. Yesterday, I received a letter from one of those regarding the need for rehabilitation of the stop bank opposite Trident High School. Remember the discussion about the stumps, and Kirsty Brown, as of this morning, is taking care of that and going to meet them. But apart from that, it's really in the staff's hands now.
Very much appreciated and acknowledged.
Thank you, Councillor White. And I omitted to say that I also attended memorial service for Jackie Hughes. Jackie Hughes was a long-time councillor here on the Regional Council in its formative days, and must have been one of the original councillors that served on the Port of Tauranga when the Regional Council made appointments to it. So unfortunately, she died suddenly, and that service was well attended. Anything else? Well, the only other thing I'd mention here is Councillor Winters and I attended the official opening of the Waihau Bay St John Ambulance, a new facility at Waihau Bay, and the Regional Council contributed towards a vehicle to transport individuals for health reasons, not emergency reasons, a health shuttle towards Whakatane. So that was really well attended. I mean, there would have been 50 people there. 100 people there.
Yeah.
So just the power of what a community can achieve if they put their mind to trying to establish a facility. So it was done in conjunction with the fire service, wasn't it? That facility. So that was really well attended, and I think they genuinely appreciated our attendance there. Anything else, councillors, on the chairman's report? If not, we will go through to the adoption of the Bay of Plenty Public Transport Plan 22-23. So this is 9.2, which was a separate agenda item. It came in relatively late. So the substantive amount of paper there, as Councillor Von Duddleston knows, I've had a discussion with him and I've asked him to make some commentary in terms of the status of this and the procedure that's been followed in terms of the hearing and the advertising of that. Councillor Von Duddleston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This process was robust. We got very substantive feedback. All the feedback came to us that we weren't being ambitious enough, and what we ended up with once the document was finished was an enabling document. So it is a plan. There's a couple of things I want to highlight to you in the plan that came out. It will put, if we adopt, not adopt the plan, but if we adopt all the actions of the plan, the cost of council is substantive. And it shows you on page, I think it's page 56, is my, on page 34 of the actual document, that the current spending on public transport is 38 million. If this plan proposes to take that to 57 million by 2032. So that is a question that this full council, because financial matters like that are an issue for us as a full council. I want to highlight a couple of issues within where we are at, and that's that currently under the plan, 38 million spent, there's only $2.7 million collected by the fare payer. 2.7 million out of 38 million, or 37 million, collected by the passenger himself. The ratepayer, predominantly Tauranga, but also substantially Rotorua, are paying 15 million in targeted rates. So half the rate for the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, roughly, in Tauranga goes to public transport. And there's quite a bit of disquiet about that. So we've really pulled the lever on fare, subsidising fares, but I think we've pulled that lever so hard that we actually have to look for better ways or other ways to get substantive mode shift change. This plan has a very ambitious target of 20% mode shift by 2032. I remember when I was on council in 2006, the mode share was about 0.7% for public transport. And by the time I came back, and then the census in 2018 said it had got to 1.3. So we went from 0.7 to 1.3 in 12 years. And so to get to 20% is going to be an incredibly hard target to achieve, but it is ambitious, and we felt that we needed to put some stretch in there. Whether that stretch is realistic, that time will tell. But that's the background of it. Just be clear that this council has the ultimate responsibility for the spend on public transport, not the Transport Committee itself. The Transport Committee recommends to this council. This is a plan. This is a plan, and it's an ambitious plan. And I'm looking for you to support the plan. The execution and how we get there is going to be a very challenging few years to 32 if we're going to meet our targets. That's all I'm saying. So the plan, I think, is robust. It's been done with the best intentions. The community like it, but the cost to execute it will be very, very challenging. That's all I'd like to say, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Von Duddleston. In doing so, for probably my benefit, the two extra recommendations that were made in this plan are accommodated in C and D of the recommendation. Would you like to expand on those in particular and the role that Waka Kotahi may or may not play in some of these things?
Okay, so C is talking about co-investment opportunities. It's been felt strongly that to get the best out of a public transport system, we need to work collaboratively with our TLAs because they pay for the infrastructure, which is the roading and the bus stops and the bus shelters. We pay for the operational content, the actual service delivery. We wanted in the plan to ensure that there's an opportunity for us to co-invest into some of that infrastructure to try to encourage it. And the rationale behind that was in 2018, we had a blueprint for the new plan when we had the new contract for Tauranga. And what we put in 2018, this regional council elected to go from 98 buses to 135 buses, of which 5 were electric. We put a 7 million increase expenditure into that first year of the blueprint of the actioning of the contract for Tauranga, a 9-year contract with New Zealand Bus. Tauranga City agreed in principle to up the ante with the infrastructure. We're talking about the old council before the commissioners. And what happened, they actually never put a single dollar in the budget in their whole time they were there. And so there was a disconnect. Staff were not working collaboratively. That was the reason that the joint Tauranga Public Transport Joint Committee with Councillor Thompson and myself and Commissioner Tolley and Selwood will set up a separate subcommittee for just it wasn't a subcommittee, sorry, it was a committee just for Tauranga Transport to try to get a collaborative approach. And that is the commissioners and councillors at a governance level were working very well from day one. Staff stayed siloed, but I have to say that by the time we got to the beginning of July, which isn't that long ago, we were seeing real progress with collaboration within the staffing between the regional council and Tauranga City. And I commend all parties. It's not a blame game as to what was going on in the past. It's to move forward. And I think we're starting to see some real benefit of that. So the reason that the item C's in here for a co-investment opportunity to allow us the opportunity, and again, any funding will come to the full council. It's not something that a committee of council can make, but we want to be able to put the opportunities to see if we can't get a more collaborative approach than we have in the past. And that's the reason for that. The government is also, the PTOM didn't allow us to do the likes of small buses before. The government has indicated, we haven't seen the final legislation, that we will be able to tweak the public transport system to be more, so that councils are more in control. The D is talking about the super gold card concessions. This region has led the way across the country and been extremely generous to our transport disadvantaged. And we should commend ourselves for that. The super gold card extension, the issue with it is we can get money for trials, but Waka Kotahi are reluctant to fund measures beyond what has been set down through stated government policy. And so the extension of the super gold card is recommended by our transport committee because we have got haven't got strong utilisation of our public transport at the moment. So the added cost that we're not putting extra buses on for them, the buses are there operating already. So that's the reason that we believe that it's, as we build the transport system up, it is, there's no cost to us of actually allowing an extension. So that's why we're recommending that. But recognise again that this is not something that's happening right across the country. So that's my explanation.
Thank you, Councillor Von Duddleson. So it just leaves one question to be answered, that in this recommendation says consider the financial impost chief executive in terms of if these things were to occur, takes place when. Clearly it's in the new triennium. But
Absolutely. So we're going to work with the TLAs now to consider item 2C and bring you back a report. And in terms of the extension of Super Gold concession, that concession is in place till June next year. So that will be coming back to council before then.
thank you. It's been moved. Councillor Nees.
Do you need a seconder?
Yes, please.
Yes, well, I'm very happy to
Thank
second
you.
it. What I would like to say as a member of the hearings panel and also of the Public Transport Committee, I just want to recognise and commend staff for the huge amount of work they did on the plan in very tight timeframes in a very challenging operating environment where much is changing in the transport space. So I believe they have done really good work and provided the hearings panel with great support. So I'd just like to have that on the record.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, I too want to support the commendations to staff. They were absolutely spectacular throughout this whole process, and it really was an honour and a privilege to be on the hearing committee. As I've said in a number of forums before today, it was a shame that all councillors couldn't have heard the submitters. I think they were incredibly passionate. They'd done a tremendous amount of homework, and they were to be fully commended. But I just want to support the Chairman of Public Transport and say that the process was robust. You couldn't fault it, but the big issue was that we listened. We certainly listened, and we were challenged to be ambitious, and I think that's reflected in the PT Transport Plan. As has been highlighted by the Chairman and Councillor Nees and others, we're going to need huge mode shift coming up in the years ahead, and I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for this council moving forward in the next triennium, whoever's sitting here. But a 20% mode shift by 2032, I just leave that with you as being incredibly ambitious. But we're all on the same page in terms of the hearing panel and hopefully other politicians around the table today. But it's a challenge, and mode shift, I think, will be that, and climate change will be the two big challenges for the incoming council. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston. Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I do want to acknowledge the work of the committee and the process. You know, it is required. And they are working, you know, within an environment at the moment which is still quite challenging coming out of COVID. If I reflect back in the last 3 years, we have done some, in PT, some very good work in student transportation. But I think we need to be honest here. There are systemic failures still in getting more people onto buses. And that's not a criticism of the Public Transport Committee. It's a New Zealand-wide issue, in my view. And I think in the next triennium, we have to have a serious conversation around who does what, when, and how. To still operate under two authorities trying to produce a public transport system, in my view, is never going to work. And despite the so-called nice relationship now, there are different priorities from different organisations, and that's creating a problem. In fact, you could also add into that the government through NZTA or Waka Kotahi. So you have to sit down and honestly ask yourself, is $38 million been a good investment over the last 3 years, or in the current year at least? I would say no, it's not. And again, not being critical of this plan, which is ambitious or fanciful to get to 20% mode shift when we're at 1.3. You know, there has to be some serious questions asked here. When I look at how we're going to get there, from page 55, I think it is, on the supplementary report, I do not see how you're going to get to 20%. So I don't wish to be critical, I wish to be honest and say that there is still a lot more work to be done. There is changes now afoot in terms of changing an alternative to the Piton model. And I think, again, through the staff and the new committee, that we honestly need to have a good hard look at the structure in terms of how we're delivering public transport here. To my mind, it is not the regional council that does the urban design of the cities that we produce public transport for. And I think that's a fundamental flaw in this system where we have two authorities trying to deliver one service. And I'll leave it at that. And I do emphasise it's not a criticism of the process of this, because it's a legislative requirement to go through this review. You're operating with the tools in the toolbox at the moment, but they are not delivering value for money.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby. Very sage advice there. Councillor Rose.
Ka mihi nui ki a koutou e te kaimahi umā. Mr. Chair, look, I want to commend staff, but also commend the work of Councillor Von Adelson and the hearings panel over the past few months for the work that they've done to get down to this plan. My only concerns in and around the plan are the ambition side of things. Everyone knows I've been someone who's loved to be ambitious and futuristic, but 20% or a 20% increase in that, or getting to 20% from 1.3 is in less than, or in 10 years, is extremely ambitious, but more ambitious than I thought I would be going. But look, there needs to be a question on how much longer we're going to start feeding the carrot and whether we're going to start using the stick in the future. Reason being is because I feel like we've been giving too many incentives and there hasn't been enough pushing to actually try and get people on there. So I think heading into the future, and something that the next council needs to take into consideration, is how long are we going to keep feeding the carrot, and when are we actually going to start using the stick?
Thank you, Councillor Rose. But as Councillor Crosby said, the ability for this organisation to use the stick, the tools in the toolbox aren't there. But you're right, in terms of meeting that aspirational goal, if you were to meet it, the outcomes for the community are rather unpalatable, because you will need the stick. Any other speaker? Councillor Love.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the last couple of weeks, the new rates demand, the new separate rates demand from the regional council have been hitting the mailboxes, both literally and also on PCs of our residents in Tauranga. And for the first time, many of them have been exposed to how much public transport is actually costing them. And dare I say it, and don't abuse the word, there is outrage within quite a few of the electorate about a service which they don't want and never use, and what they are being required to pay for it. And I think the problem we face for the future is the ability to pay for what we see as an ambitious goal. I am concerned for the people of Tauranga about what it's going to cost them and how they might react to this.
Thank you, Councillor Love. Councillor White.
Hello, Mr. Chair. I'm hearing as an observer more on this particular space, but I'm hearing the issues around very ambitious 20% growth. I think that level of ambition is important to keep our eye on the ball of a number of things that are happening as we speak around climate change, around the imperatives to really create ambition to make those changes happen. If that's not incentive enough, I'm not sure what is. Because I'm sure on our page as a regional council, climate change is going to be a big ticket item, and this transport scenario is part of that. So ambition, 20%, I think it's something that should be front and centre in mind, and let's go for it.
Thank you, Councillor White. So we're here to adopt the plan that's been through the consultative process, and this is the recommendation. Thank you for those comments. So it's been moved and second. No further comment. I intend to put it. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Right, councillors, to run in tandem with that, I want to move to 9.3, which is Public Transport Services Infrastructure Business Case Delegated Authority. Moved. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Rose, second. Any further questions? If not, I'll put it. Councillor Nees.
Sorry, just a comment, Mr. Chair. Could I be provided with a copy of the reference case? Is that, there's no reason why I couldn't get to see a copy of that. Thank you. And I'd just like to comment that as frustrated as I am with the slowness and bureaucracy and cost of the whole business case development process for Waka Kotahi funding, I just want to note that this business case is very important in that it will help us to deliver the public transport network that actually does deliver that step change and move us towards trying to meet that very ambitious target for the community of the Western Bay. So just want to note the importance of this work, albeit it does come at quite a large cost.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Right, 9.4. It's my pleasure to welcome Sir Rob and Scott Hamilton from Keysight. We have Kieran on Zoom. Welcome, Kieran. So this is the Keysight Group Toi Moana Trust annual reports for the year ended 30th of June 2022. I will hand it over to you, gentlemen. Welcome, Sir Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my pleasure to lead the presentation this morning on the performance of Keysight. We've got a number of slides just to work through. So perhaps if we just start with operating environment, which was up there before you. We do certainly live in interesting times, and just sort of highlighting the uncertainty also of the present environment. Obviously, the war in Ukraine continues to feature centrally in the world's attention. And obviously many implications flow from that in terms of geopolitical stability, as well as some impacts continuing on market supply of particularly export commodities that come from that part of the world. Labour market continues to be very tight, as we all know. Unemployment very low, which puts pressure on not only the supply and availability of labour, but wage rates obviously are uplifting and playing its role in very strong inflationary conditions that we're experiencing not only in New Zealand but around the world. The central banks, again, not only in New Zealand but around the world, are obviously fighting inflation, mainly through monetary policy by increasing interest rates. And that of course sets in motion impacts for other markets, particularly equity markets, which are suffering in most environments. Certainly New Zealand share prices are falling, and there is uncertainty clearly where they might be going. So our policymakers, particularly Reserve Bank, have got their feet firmly on the brakes. As I say, with inflation as its target. But on the other side, fiscal policy, government spending is not as restrained, I would say. So you've got a duality of forces there, which one does not really keep up with the other. Monetary policy is doing the heavy lifting. We still have supply chain issues, and you'll see when I make comments on the port performance that they remain a feature of our current environment. Most New Zealanders, I think, come to experience that not only in relation to access to goods and services that they might be wanting, but also the price that they're confronting for those goods and services. Just perhaps on share markets, you can see there on the slide a material measure or indicator. The Dow Jones was down 19% since January this year. And the rising interest rate, of course, is pulling money from equity markets across to debt markets. So, and that is set to continue. So, again, prediction is a dangerous game right now in a volatile environment, but that looks like it's set to continue. As against that, there are some tentative signs of improvement in terms of certain areas of the New Zealand market. I think one thing before I leave the slide, which I think could have been included, is our exchange rate trajectory, because as I think most people know, New Zealand is heading towards 50 cents on the US dollar, and we're in the 80s now as far as the Australian dollar is concerned. So we're well off our highs. So we have a weakening Kiwi, and a primary flow-on effect of that essentially is good for export, but makes imports expensive. So that may have a dampening effect on import-based goods in terms of the price impact, but that's inflationary on the importing side as a result of that currency.
So Rob, could I just interrupt you with your imminent knowledge of the impost of some of these global issues, the events of the last 24 hours in terms of 48 hours in terms of monetary policy playing out in the UK.
Yes.
And you've seen a rapid decline in the terms of the value of the pound. Any likely flow on into our equity markets or monetary value in New Zealand dollars directly as a relation of those moves?
Well, media is indicating that it's rippling around the world. The UK financial sector is quite a significant part, of the world financial market, and so I think we can expect ripple effect. That it's an interesting move because, of course, it's going against the trend. It's a monetary expansion in the UK to support the currency and other things. But commentators are still getting their mind around it, I suppose. But I think that yes, it's a contrary move in the direction that we've been travelling in terms of tightening. So it is, and it's a micro response to the conditions of the UK. So I think that it will have its effect, but as I say, it's also bottom up micro, and the response to the UK conditions, the Brexit dimensions, the political change that have gone on there do in some respects confine it, in my view, to the UK. But as I say, commentators in this morning's press are certainly saying it's rippling through the sort of macro settings of interest rates at the same time. So probably the answer, Chairman, is both. Okay, well, anyway, as I say, we're in interesting times. What does that all mean for Keysight? I think that the sort of key takeaways essentially is the volatility. I think it does mean that risk aversion goes up and we move into a more conservative mode, but our balance sheet and other settings, obviously, they've been honed and designed with these conditions in mind. So if we go to the next slide on financials, and Scott will briefly talk to these.
So good morning, everyone. So this is just a summary of the Keysight financials, appreciating that in the financials that we present here on this slide, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about Keysight and the port specifically following this. This is the IFRS accounting requirement, so effectively we consolidate the port, and the minority interest is effectively the 45% of the Port of Tauranga that is not owned by Keysight. What we do note there is that the port obviously had a good year, and Keysight's returns are down significantly on the prior year. We'll explain those in a slide or two, but in essence, it's basically it's market performance, unrealised market performance that we're seeing through there, but we'll get into that in a second. I'll let Rob talk. I'll talk very quickly about the high levels on the port, and then I'll get Rob to talk about the details. So the port itself this year had a very, very solid result. So it had 11% increase in its operating income. A lot of that was derived not necessarily by additional throughput, but by additional charges on the port itself. And as a result, they had an increase in their profit after tax, which was fantastic. The item of note probably around the total assets there is that the total assets of the port have leapt by a significant amount. It's not 12%. And basically that is a result of the revaluation of the land at the port. So a lot of the land along the port side this year has been recognised as significantly higher in value, in fact 30% higher. So there's a massive kind of increase in the value of that land. Obviously for us is, it's not a cash item. It doesn't result in a distribution to Keysight or anything else, but it does put a greater underlying asset against that port. And so as a result, the net tangible assets, or effectively the assets per share that are held by the port, have increased by $1 from $2 to $3 roughly. But there still is a significant gap between the port's asset price and its share price, which reflects the goodwill. In other words, it's a very, very well-respected company. And as a cornerstone shareholder, we should be very, very proud of the performance that the port has achieved.
Chairman, are we able to ask questions as we go through, or would you like to wait?
At your direction, Sir Rob,
Happy to take questions
as we go through.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm interested in the impact of the Tauranga City new rating regime in terms of the port, particularly given the increase in valuation. Can you give us any percentage figure in terms of the increase in the rating requirement on the port?
Also, Rob answers.
Yes.
I think you're asking two questions there. The first is the proposed differential in terms of rating, but there's also the issue of the rateable land issue. So Rob might want to comment on that as well.
Yes, I can't give any pinpoint response on detail, Councillor, but what I can say is Council and the port executives have been in dialogue about the new arrangements, and that they continue. I don't believe they're finalised at this point, but they've certainly the board is being kept informed as to the evolving dialogue. So there's an inflationary direction to it, is perhaps all I could say about that. But certainly happy to perhaps respond back to Council if the Chairman would like that as that information comes to hand and is landed. I think that perhaps if I just pick up on this next slide on the port, but just leaving off from where Scott mentioned about the net tangible asset on the last slide, 50% of the share price at $6.16 is backed by tangible assets on the balance sheet. But that links also to the fact that the port has been engaging through its IFRS obligations and very significant write-ups to its real estate assets. And that is causing the port just to examine the period of the write-ups, because we had a big write-up last year as well as the year that has just elapsed. I mean, in two years in succession, there have been quite material uplifts, but of course obliged by the external audit requirements in IFRS. This slide just highlights just some of the operating dynamics. As Scott has said, the port has, I think, operated very well in its challenging conditions, which are largely around the pinch points in its supply chain. Ships, as you can see at the second bullet point, boats arriving off window, which obviously in the logistics business makes it extremely challenging to handle. We've got the Port of Auckland impacts on boat arrivals into non-Auckland ports as a result of their inability to handle their normal or business as usual capacities. The workforce also is strained, not only across New Zealand, but obviously in the port, and this is on top of a COVID experience, which was quite demanding in the run-up to the present time, despite the abatement, if you like, of the COVID impact. All those things considered, I think the port management is to be congratulated for sort of navigating it very well. I've mentioned there the employment court hearing for the berth extension, which the port continues to
Environment Court.
The Environment Court, yeah. The Environment Court hearing, sorry, for the berth extension, which when I last was before the council, I indicated that we were hopeful as a port organisation to have that heard this year. And there was some prospect of that, but the court schedule is not permitted or allowed that, so it will spill into 2023. and that no doubt will gather, some attention as we work that through. The port has also been extending its investment in port automation. Obviously, that's a very significant impact to ESG matters and carbon management. So I'm pleased to acknowledge that port automation continues significantly as a direction of travel. Cruise ships are welcome back to the port as of the middle of next month, 15 October. Again, I think that's not only good for port business, but hopefully for the local economy and business sector. And just to note that the port AGM this year is timed for the 28th of October, 2022. Going on to you, Scott, on the
so hitting the Keysight numbers, I guess just looking at the profitability of Keysight this year versus last year, you'll note the second line down there, the capital gains losses that last year we had a $50 million gain out of both our equity markets and out of our private equity markets as well. This year is a small loss, so we've given some of that back. But it still gives us well in excess of the hurdle rate that we do set. We do acknowledge that there will be volatility through the markets as they come. On the property sides, we've got a significant write-up in terms of property land, and again, that's the Rangiora work and the work that we're undertaking there, and the value that we're adding to Rangiora through the infrastructure that we are putting in there. And most of our other costs are largely the same. Our income tax is again, it's the cost of that Rangiora development. Profit on land for us is a taxable event. So Keysight performance still, I think, in this market, very positive to see that favourable return. And I think the overall return that we are seeing over 5 years is still around 11.5%, so well in excess of the 7% that we are targeting as a benchmark. If we very quickly look at the allocation, I'm just waiting for it to catch up with me.
Is it possible before we move on to just ask one more question about the port? Thank you. Very conscious that you've reported previously that the port is very conscious of its licence to operate, and that the move towards reducing its emissions footprint is part of that. And I think I read somewhere that there has been a reduction over the past year, and that you're relying heavily on the automation to increase that. I just wondered, we have had discussions in the past about the way emissions are counted with international shipping. And I just wonder whether that's something that Keysight is having a look at with regard to emissions. Because as I understand it, the emissions from the port of leaving gets counted into the port of destination, but it also works the other way when it's leaving from Tauranga and going back to overseas ports. So how is that being accounted for within the port of Tauranga?
We have a slide on ESG, Scott. Have you got it?
We do have a slide on ESG, but it probably doesn't cover so much in terms of the question that you're raising there, Jane. I think, look, there's probably something that we do need to come back to you on in terms of the exact answer on that, because I can't give it off the top of my head. You are right, the port of Tauranga, in one sense, if you look at that port of destination, port of arrival, as an international port, we get caught more than a domestic port in New Zealand, who's effectively a feeder, because we pick up the lion's share of that if you do that on a look-through basis. It's probably a question we'd actually need to ask the port themselves in terms of that response, and then come back to you if we can.
And also with regard to that, I understand the port's been quite active within the Mount Industrial Air Working Party to consider air quality issues as well. Thank you.
Just looking at the investment assets of Keysight, this year we've got a significant change, and this is more of a rebalance rather than anything else, where we have sold out a number of listed assets to acquire into those private equity markets. Last year we had a high return from global markets. We had 22% across the Keysight portfolio. and across the share portfolio that we held, but this year the markets were backwards. We actually went backwards less than the markets went backwards, so that's a positive thing from our perspective. But the private equity market was very, very solid for us over the last 12 months and 24 months. And really what this does highlight is that the process that Keysight has in the background of a diversified portfolio is there to try and make sure that when some things are potentially running backwards, that we have other things that are more stable and vice versa, so that we get a more consistent, a lower risk long-term return. Looking at the Toi Moana portfolio next, which is obviously council's investment that Keysight is managing. There was 2 distributions made last year. One of the 2.25 million, which is the 5% targeted return, and then a second one of another 2.25 million, which was the 2020 catch-up return. The assets at the end of the year, because markets were backwards in May and June, were just below the 45 million. The return for Toi Moana last year was 2.7%. But if you actually look at the benchmark per the SIPO for the fund, it was, if we'd matched the benchmark exactly, we would have been down 9%. So to have a significant outperformance during the year, I think has been a great result in terms of council's asset position there. And we note that there was the additional funds that were received into the Toi Moana fund on the 1st of July after year end. Make sure I don't get 2 slides at once. Our audit process, Kieran, if we can invite you to make comment on that.
Yeah, kia ora. Most of you will know that I'm the chair of the Audit Risk Committee. So the audit process this year, excuse me, the port's audit ran largely to schedule, and that fed into Keysight's audit, which ran reasonably smoothly this year. There were improvements on the Keysight side of things. We are continually improving our internal systems, and our Chief Financial Officer, it was his second audit this year. So those aspects ran more smoothly, and we spent some time with Audit New Zealand to ensure that their side of the equation ran a little more smoothly than previous years as well. So we did quite a bit of pre-work in briefings to understand some of the key sort of issues within our organisation, and to seek agreement on the precise audit evidence that would be required, so that we could have pre-agreement and pre-work on that prior to the audit starting. The audit process did run reasonably smoothly, which I guess made it all the more disappointing when we were advised the afternoon prior to the scheduled board sign-off of the financial statements that Audit New Zealand wouldn't be able to finalise the remaining items in their audit and couldn't deliver to that time frame. So we did need to reconvene, and we did eventually manage to have an unqualified audit opinion and approved accounts in time for NZX deadlines. So we do plan to feed back through to OAG again this year, just on how we consider the audit process could be streamlined further in future, and how we might seek some cost efficiencies, both internal and external, relating to the audit. And so that's an ongoing continuous improvement work stream for us. That's it from me. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Kieran. Next, I guess, is for us to give you an update in terms of the Rangiora Business Park. Obviously, this is a significant focus for Keysight in the past 12 months. We've made a massive amount of progress, is something which I think we can, as a broad group we're very, very proud of. We did commence the earthworks on stage 1A and to complete those within the earthwork season last year. The second earthwork season's commenced, but we're still waiting on the rain to stop so that we can actually get underway and do the work on stage 1B. And that will basically mean that by the end of this summer, there will be 30 to 35 hectares roughly of flat land at Rangiora, which will be basically ready for the other infrastructure to come in and support it. We've had some fantastic engagement with Tapawika as the local iwi in terms of their mana whenua there. They are supporting the wastewater treatment plant, or wastewater treatment pipe realignment and crossing the river change. So, you know, that's nice to have that backing and endorsement. I think that's an indication of how that relationship with iwi is working in that catchment for us. We have awarded the contracts to Higgins for the interchange. So this is the Rangiora Business Park interchange that is a four-legged interchange, diamond interchange going into the Rangiora Business Park, and that will commence effectively immediately. And so we're doing some earthworks around that as well in terms of on-ramps and off-ramps. You'll start to see those works this earthwork season as well. And in terms of the stormwater and the picture on the bottom right is, we'll call it an artist's impression of what a 51 hectare stormwater pond looks like. And we've worked with the regional council around that to make sure that we can get stages 1 and 2 away and work around additional pumping that may be required in the future to support the slow release of that water out to the Kaituna over time in accordance with the consent requirements that sit there, the existing consent requirements that exist there. So I think there's been an amazing progress that's been achieved by the team, and when we do go out there and talk with the local iwi, they are quite excited by some of the progress that has been made as well.
Can I just ask, have you finally resolved the fresh water supply for the business park?
Yes, we have. So the fresh water supply is in multiple parts. Again, it's all set out through the financial contribution schedule through Western Bay. Stage 1 is able to be supplied by the existing supply that sits within the catchment of the Eastern Supply Network. And future stages will be using bore water support from an existing Western Bay site with an existing consent. So we have just then alignment of getting the water from point A to point B, but that does give sufficient water for the business park.
Councillor Thompson and Councillor Winters.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair, just a couple of bouquets, if I may. Firstly, to you, Councillor White, I think you've clearly been instrumental in assisting in terms of the relationship with Tapawika, so I'd like to acknowledge that, but also to obviously acknowledge the work of staff in that regard as well. And it's quite clear that the Keysight organisation's on a journey, and I commend you for that. The second bouquet is really to you, Scott. You know, Rangiora has been a long time in the gestation, and this is absolutely wonderful to now see progress. But of all of the Keysight team, I think we do need to acknowledge the work and effort that you personally have put into this, and I hope you're leaving the organisation feeling very, very proud of what you've achieved on this particular project. So a huge bouquet to you, Scott, in particular, for what has been achieved. Just remarkable. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Winters.
Hi, team. I was at a Meet the Councillors or Candidates evening the other night in Rotorua, and people were critical of Keysight's lack of investment into Rotorua, and we talked about some of the investments we've done there. And I was going to talk about a certain investment into a forestry company, and I couldn't remember whether it's public information yet.
Yep. So yes, it is public information. So look, Keysight's investments in Rotorua, we have a partnership with Tony Bradley through Lakes Commercial Development. That has developed 2 buildings now. We also have a 44% stake in PF Olsen, and obviously they are a significant employer in that forestry space. We are working through the process of the build of the Forestry Institute's building as well, which is a little bit slower than we would like, but we are working through that. So there is a number of investments into the Rotorua catchment. And I think also Rangiora Business Park actually, while it is not in the Rotorua Lakes Council catchment per se, the situation where it's located, sitting between Whakatane, between Rotorua and between Tauranga, actually has benefit, I think, across all of those regions, because it has the genuine ability to service a very, very wide catchment. So I think there's benefit to Rotorua indirectly through that as well.
Understand that. So thanks for that clarification about PF Olsen, because I just didn't want to put my foot into it. Second question, Mr. Chairman, and it's just frustrating to hear Kieran talk about the issues with the Officer Auditor General. This is the 2nd year in a row that we've had these issues. We've got a resolution here on 6 on page 99 that we reappoint the OAG as the auditor. Are you happy that we go down this line today to reappoint the OAG?
Perhaps if I thank you very much, Councillor. I mean, there have been some frustrations and challenges in that interface. I think the statutory position as the Auditor General is the appointor of the auditor for us at Keysight. So any attempt to change the auditor must have the Auditor General's agreement and permission. So we have suggested in the past that the Auditor General look at possibly aligning the audit firm with the port auditor, which is external. Again, it's actually a KPMG who audit the port are an appointment by the Auditor General. So that role continues, but it is possible for the Auditor General to approve a change. And so we will be talking to the Auditor General about that. I think it's fair to say that we get a very good audience with the Auditor General, but we have been talking to him, I think, 3 years in a row now about this particular topic. So I think coordinating with Council, because you're in another audit environment with Audit New Zealand relationships, I think that's something that we should work together on.
Happy with that explanation, but share the frustration with you.
Thank you.
Councillor Brunning and then Councillor Thurston.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I suppose the ultimate question for our council is how comfortable are you with the world volatility to be able to meet our expectations of returns back to this council going forward? And I know it's difficult to predict, but you must have some level of comfort or discomfort and advice to the new council that will be coming in as to this council's expectations, because we do rely on you heavily to subsidise our rates. So if you could answer that, please.
Well, perhaps if I just say a few words by introduction and then Scott can elaborate. This topic is one that Keysight probably has in the top 1 or 2 of its framings as a company, because we're a wholly owned subsidiary with a substantial obligation to provide dividends to council. And we obviously know that council has to budget its own requirements with that very substantial ingredient of the Keysight dividend. And we work through a very, in terms of the planning and the effort that goes in and working with council together on that, I think that through our procedures, that gets substantial priority and attention. At the end of the day, however, it is a balancing act, and we are delegated investors to optimise by meeting a minimum cash flow requirement for council, but growing our balance sheet prudently beyond that minimum. The port dividend is a substantial source of cash, which takes care of the bulk of our cash obligation on our own dividends to the council. And fortunately, even through these challenging times, the port's performance has been more stable than expected. But we've got to obviously factor in, as a first part of the calculation, the expectation on dividend flow from the Port of Tauranga. Beyond that, we have to configure our own assets, our own balance sheet, and bias it to cash returns that meet that budgeted requirement. In the back of that, we have reserving, and we also have actually assets that can be sold. Even the portfolio assets, for example, could be sold, the funds assets. So in that sense, I think there's two dimensions to think about. One is the primary cash flow management we do, but the second is having assets on our balance sheet that can be liquidated. Now, we wouldn't want to be doing that all of the time, but basically that's sort of more emergency or reserve funding strategy. So I think you can see, perhaps in balancing all of that up, that why we as governors and as executives of Keysight can be comfortable that we can manage and navigate. And also part of it is keeping this dialogue open with not only councillors here on this forum, but obviously ongoingly with the executive, which I think we do. So with those words of introduction, Scott, you might be able to add further detail or relevant observation.
Yeah. So look, some of those points, Councillor, are actually covered in the next couple of slides as well. We've got a couple more to go, but that includes things like looking forward at that dividend, and also how do we then interface with the new council as well. So we'll cover some of those in the next couple of slides if I can. Sorry, do you want me to take the next question now?
Councillor Thurston.
But thank you for your clarifications with regards Keysight investments in Rotorua. But as I've said many times, and I know my Rotorua colleagues will support me here, there is a perception in Rotorua that Rangiora is going to create substantial commercial and industrial drift from Rotorua, and it may only be a perception. But I know you say it's a win-win for the Bay of Plenty, but that perception is pretty real over the hill where we come from. So what I urge you gentlemen to do, and the ladies on your board, is to get in front of the Rotorua Lakes Council, the new council, very early in the piece, and do a big hard sell on the benefits to the Bay of Plenty, Rangiora. Thanks so much.
We can just quickly move through the last couple of slides. Look, ESG, and we'll put NC on there because I think for us in the Bay of Plenty and in New Zealand, that's definitely a large part of what we do. These are significant focuses for us. There is new disclosure regimes that are coming through, which the team are basically looking to try and bring into our climate reporting from 2024. That sounds like it's a long way away, but basically if you think about it, that means you've got to start getting your comparative information now. So really it's an obligation on us to start looking at what are we recording and how are we recording it. Within our annual report, which was published onto our website and to the NZX yesterday, we have gone through the ESG and C piece and really looked at how are we demonstrating those things through our behaviours and through our case studies and through our investments. And that's really been the focus for us is how do we demonstrate that. And there is significant change too that we have seen even with the way that ESG and responsible investment is actually taking place globally as well now. If we go back 5 or 6 years, ESG meant that you didn't go anywhere near mining, but most of us need lithium for our electric cars. You know, so it's actually about how do those companies actually act responsibly so that we can then make sure that we are providing the right form of future that we want for our children and our grandchildren. And so really there is changes even in the way that ESG is perceived globally at the moment. We obviously have to be very, very conscious of how some of those things are taking place.
So this slide touches also on a prior conversation in terms of just highlights through the triennium, and perhaps just by way of an introduction to these sort of key points across the last 3 years, I'd just like as chairman of Keysight to acknowledge council and councillors over this period. The relationship that Keysight has with council is clearly important, very important, and I think basically it's been a fact that we've worked well together, both organisations at both governor and executive levels, and that's certainly worthy of acknowledgement. So just on this slide, just picking up on some key points across the 3 years, the dividend to council through that time has grown from 31.2 million to 40 million, which is a compounding increase in that dividend of 8.6% per annum, which I think, again, worth acknowledgement. The forecast for the 2022 dividend is 42.5 million against the SOI target of 42.4 million, so a shade above the SOI target. Keysight assets, excluding the port, have grown from 348 million through this 3-year period to 479 million. And obviously, as has been acknowledged, the Rangiora Business Park has commenced with very significant support from relevant stakeholders, including councils and PGF. So again, I think something to be proud of through that period. Yeah, so I don't know, Scott, whether you want to add anything to that.
Look, I will just probably make one brief comment, and that is that the dividend that we're forecasting to council next year, or sorry, this year that we're partially in, at 42.5, we did put in a new dividend framework in the last year, and what that was looking at was an assessment of based off past dividends with an inflationary impact on it, and on the growth in the assets in the Keysight portfolio as part of that factor as well. What we've seen this year is that we underestimated very slightly the inflationary impact, so that's given an uplift there. But as we saw in the financial results, the Keysight growth in terms of the assets last year wasn't as great because of market performance, and so therefore there was a slight negative there. So thus the net effect was another $100,000 that's looking to be distributed up to council in this coming year.
Perhaps if I could just come on to transition. You may be aware that this will be Scott's last presentation at council as our chief executive for Keysight. So I think I should take the opportunity as chairman of Keysight to acknowledge Scott's tenure and contribution in this forum. Scott started his role as the current chief executive in September 2010. So that's 12 years ago, just clocked over 12 years. So quite a long time, but I suppose for some, and possibly Scott too, it may have gone in a flash. But across that 12 years, a great deal has happened. The total assets of Keysight have grown from $1 billion to $3.2 billion. And the dividend has gone from 4.7 million per annum to 40 million per annum. And there have been massive projects through that time, the least of which, I should say, not the least of which, is Rangiora, which has just been commented on. But one can also think about port investment aspects and the issue of the PPS, the acquisition of major real estate assets such as the Vault and Spring Street, etc. So I think it goes beyond doubt that Scott has presided over an amazing set of achievements with Keysight. I think it's stellar, and I think in New Zealand's context, it's possibly one of the best and biggest New Zealand stories that even I think transcends and digs, comparatively into the private sector listed companies and the like. So. It's a tremendous achievement, and Scott has been the key, I would suggest, the key individual that has brought this about. So it really is my privilege, in a sense, to just thank Scott wholeheartedly for that effort and achievement, and also the fact that I've led the company as chairman alongside Scott for six of those 12 years. And Mike Smith before me. So I don't think any words can kind of go all the way to do a decent job of acknowledgement, but can I just take this opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to mark that out? Scott is not a person who likes to celebrate, and actually we've had to sort of pull teeth really to get him into a mode of accepting a bit of acknowledgement. And even now I'm going beyond what he authorised me to do. But that is the chairman's prerogative, I'm afraid. So I'll leave it at that and ask you to So carrying on, just in terms of the transition, Lyndon Settle, we're pleased to say, will be joining us on the 19th of October as at the switch point. And Lyndon is a senior executive in Tainui Group Holdings. We look very much forward to working with Lyndon. As one door closes, another door opens. But Lyndon has big boots to fill and follow. So we wish him all the best in that regard. And Scott will be working in an overlap period with Lyndon, introducing Lyndon to the relevant stakeholders through the first half of October. Keysight will make a presentation of the new council workshop on the 1st and the 2nd of November. I should have also just added perhaps that, Scott, we wish you well too in your future endeavours, just to close off my earlier remarks. So I don't know, perhaps, Mr. Chairman, whether you'd like to invite Scott to say a couple of words, if that's okay. I think that would be appropriate.
I'll do that shortly.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, councillors, is there any further discussion on the presentation? And whilst they're thinking about that, Sir Rob and Scott, could I compliment the Keysight family, so that yourself, Sir Rob, Scott, your executive team, for the quality of the annual report? It's outstanding in terms of the quality and the presentation of it. So compliments to you all and your other director colleagues for presenting it in that manner. Because at the end of the day, as you said, Sir Rob, it's a wholly owned activity of the Regional Council, and we to date have given the Board of Keysight the mandate and the responsibility to look at the investment portfolio that you've got, driven out of the need for a dividend coming through to council. And I know that expectation is not going to decrease, but we appreciate the market you work in has some volatility around it that would probably scare many of us sitting around the board table from time to time. So, councillors, before I move to the recommendations, after discussion with both the Chief Executive and Scott, in terms of the recommendation, I want to rescind the recommendations 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're only going to deal with the recommendation 1, which is to receive report and the appointment of the auditor. Now, yes, thank you. I just want to clarify that in terms of the context of the process that we've been through here. And there are some papers that have been, or some background that probably should have been contained in the presentation leading to those recommendations that I've asked to be withdrawn. This is not a rebuttal of the recommendations, but given that this is the last meeting of the triennium, the last meeting of this council, the other material issue is that I considered it appropriate that the new council is the body that endorses these recommendations, having had the opportunity to see the background to this. And I just thought it was a bit premature of the existing council at the last meeting we've got to sign off in terms of these recommendations from 2 to 3 to 5. So is there any councillor who wants to make any comment in terms of the presentation of this, the context of what I've just suggested? If not, Councillor Thompson?
No, Mr. Chairman, just to endorse your comments, and particularly around making it abundantly clear that by not addressing the remuneration issues today is in no way, anyway, a reflection on the extremely high calibre of the governance of Keysight, for which we are extremely grateful and respectful. So thank you for your comments, Mr. Chair, in clarifying that, because I think it's really, really important. But we do want to acknowledge with great respect the calibre of the governance of Keysight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So I'll move the adoption of the Keysight annual report and the reappointment of the auditor. It's been seconded by Councillor Love. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Right, so thank you. That just leads me through to the chairman's opportunity here, and I haven't asked Mr. Hamilton whether or not I can say anything, but I'm going to say anything. So, as Sir Rob has said, this is the last meeting that Scott will preside over as the Chief Executive. Have we got that presentation? Okay, I'll just do this off pat then. So, as you know, Scott as Sir Rob has said, has been at the helm of Keysight for the last 12 years. He came in 2010. At the time, in 2010, he was the sole employee of Keysight. That entity has now grown to 15 FTEs. And as I said, that's testament to Scott's ability to put around him a team of people that have delivered the following results. And Sir Rob has been in some detail covering those, but I think it's worthwhile repeating them. So back in 1998, well before Scott was here, but at early days of Keysight, they delivered something like a $1.3 million dividend to this entity. Here we are in 21-22, and the dividend coming into this council is in excess of $40 million. The other notable thing is, as Sir Rob has said, is the growth in terms of the assets. And we all know at the inception of Keysight, they had assets and they had debt equaling the number of assets that they had. But here we are today with an asset book totaling $480 million. And as Sir Rob has said, that's outstanding in terms of any investment company. And I think, Sir Rob, you made the comment, a comparative comment about the equity markets, the private market. I think, as you said, this is equally as good as what some of these private markets turn out, given the constraint you've got in terms of the risk portfolio, the risk profile you have to operate within. And I think there's one thing I took out of the annual report here that I think we should all reflect on in terms of the annual report, in terms of what Scott's contributed to this and looking to the future. And that is, our best stories are still ahead of us. So Scott's an out-of-the-box thinker. He's got the ability to look at the opportunities that probably many of us don't see. And I think he pushes the boundaries in terms of strategic thinking. As a council, we probably don't see that, but clearly the board of Keysight see that from time to time. As I said, you know, the dividend repatriation back to here is significant. And as they've been through their presentation, those social, economic, environmental outcomes is a long way from where we started back in that early dividend times. He's brought a team of creative and talented individuals to deliver on the long-held vision of creating intergenerational wealth in the region. And as you start your new chapter, Scott, we reflect on what you've brought to not only Keysight, but this organisation. And we feel proud of the great legacy that you're going to leave. So we wish you well in terms of your future. And if you'd just like to come up here, we've got a small gift on behalf of the council we'd like to present you with. And then, as Sir Rob said, you can make a comment.
Look, I'm never one not to hold back from saying something. Look, thank you very, very much, both Sir Rob and Chairman Leader, for the kind words. I think as a council, you can be extremely proud of what you hold. I think you have the best investment CCO in New Zealand sitting in the Bay of Plenty here. And it has grown to be that. And I think it's taken a lot of boldness and a lot of trust and confidence from council in terms of that relationship to allow some of those decisions to take place. And that allows someone like myself as a chief executive the ability to then grow an organisation and to grow an opportunity that Keysight to become what Keysight is today. So I actually think it's a two-way street. I think there are a lot of organisations out there which don't get the same benefit that potentially they could have because they don't have the support of a shareholder like Keysight has. And you know, it takes, council's got to give something up to get something as good as it's got, but I think it's got something significantly better than perhaps even I thought it would have been when I first arrived at Keysight all of those many, many years ago. So I think the organisation itself is in an outstanding place. I think the opportunity that is there for Lyndon and the team is still outstanding and can continue to grow and continue to fill those buckets that we've created. So that we get better and better and better as we go forward. And I think that will be to the benefit of council, to the benefit of the people of the region, to the benefit of iwi, through a lot of the different things that Keysight has achieved over that time. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the kind words. And I still enjoy sitting down at some stage and enjoying what may be inside that container.
Thank you, Sir Rob. Thanks, Scott. And if you just give us a few minutes, you can join us for a morning tea.
Very good. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Right, thank you, councillors. I want to move through to 9.5, which is a follow-on, and 240. It's a follow-on from the comments Sir Rob and Scott have made in terms of the Toi Moana Trust. So we've got Kamaran and Matt, or Kamaran can handle it. So councillors, this is a direct follow-on from the comments in terms of the performance of the Toi Moana Trust that Sir Rob and Scott mentioned. So anything to add, Kamaran?
Morning, councillors. Thank you, Chair. Just key highlights to note in terms of changes from the draft statement of intent presented to you back in April to the final statement of intent that's in front of you. There's essentially the additional $25 million investment made as reflected in earlier conversations in this meeting in July, and also the capital preservation target being changed from an initial 7-year term to a rolling 5-year basis. So those are, in essence, the highlights of the changes to the final SOI.
Thank you, Kamaran. Happy to move. Councillor Winters has moved. Councillor Von Dudleston second. Is there any further commentary? If not, as we move through, this is what I should have done. Could I just note the participation of Councillor Crosby and Councillor White in terms of Keysight Holdings and their involvement in these things? I know from time to time you come here, you have to express a conflict of interest, but the work that you perform on behalf of that, as well as the Chief Executive, I should add, the work you perform on behalf of the wider council here in terms of Keysight is really appreciated. Okay, thank you. So the resolution in terms of 9.5 Toi Moana Trust Statement of Intent has been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. We're adjourned for 15 minutes for morning tea.
Chambers is back on.
Thank you, councillors. Can we reconvene, please? So we're moving to agenda item 9.6, page 250, Community Participation Annual Report. Welcome, Stephanie and Katarina. What are those two gentlemen doing in between you? Right, Steph.
Tēnā koe, Chairman. Through the Chair, tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Stephanie McDonald. I'm the Team Leader for Community Engagement, and I'm supported here by the team that have been working on the Community Participation Impact area. This is on page 250 of your agenda. This is an information-only paper, but we're here today to provide an overview of the progress that we've made since this plan was adopted in December and some key highlights that we'd like to share. This paper covers a broad range of work, looking at community engagement, volunteering, funding for community-led projects and democracy. Now, this was really hard, but I'd like to draw your attention to just a few highlights. One is our online engagement platform, Participate, that was launched in February last year. This is a platform for the whole of the organisation where people can provide feedback in many different ways, formally and informally. In the last 12 months, we've had almost 40,000 views of this new website, and we have over 3,000 people who have subscribed, who've provided their contact details so they can stay updated on the issues that interest them most. We have also trialled participatory budgeting, where community have proposed projects, 46 of them, and then the community have decided how funding was allocated to those different projects. Now, this project has been our most representative in terms of participation. We've looked at age, gender, geography, and ethnicity, and it's been our highest reach in terms of match for census data. So we're pretty chuffed with the outcome there. We'll be monitoring those projects over the coming 6 months, and we'll report back to Council early in the new year on how those projects have progressed. With our environmental enhancement funding, we have fully allocated funding for the 21-22 year, and already have received projects amounting more than $360,000 of requests. Not all of those projects will receive funding, but it's certainly great to see. In regard to volunteering, the volunteering hours that were reported earlier in the year through monitoring and ops, more than 80,000 hours of time has been provided by volunteers in our community. Now, this is not just a numbers game. It's also about looking at the difference we're making in our community. For example, the volunteers who care for the Blade at Whakamarama have been able to extend the area that they care from 30,000 to more like 300,000 since they started. So we're making a real difference in terms of pest control in that area. We've also been supporting our democratic processes, encouraging people to enrol, to stand and take part in the voting of our current elections. So clearly there's been a lot going on, but there's more to come. We will continue in the new year to implement our Community Participation Action Plan, to continue to monitor the baseline data that we've gathered and look for opportunities to grow and innovate where we can. I thank you very much for the opportunity to present on behalf of the whole team here, and we welcome any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Councillor Thompson.
I don't, through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions, but I do have a few comments, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Firstly, I just want to thank staff, all of you, including the male members of the team, for this report. But I also want to thank you on behalf of everyone who's been involved in all of the work in this particular area of council activity. It's of no surprise, I hope, that for me personally, this area of activity, which is around enabling and empowering our communities to have voice and choice in their place, is the most important thing of all that we do. That's just a personal point of view, but I believe going forward that this council has enormous opportunities to really be an enabler and an empowerer of communities participating and engaging in how they want to shape and deliver their places. So my grateful personal thanks to you all. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I wish the new council well in terms of continuing to support this function and increase its support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Rose, then Winters.
Firstly, I'd like to move a paper. And secondly, I want to thank the kaimahi in front of us. You are all beautiful in your own way. Let's start with that. But the mahi that you guys have done over the past 3 years has been extraordinary. Whether it sits within the volunteer space or within the youth engagement space, the mahi you guys have done has been incredible. So ka mihi nui ki a koutou e te kaimahi mā. And of course, even better is seeing what the future holds. And so for the new council, I hope that community engagement sits at the heart of what they do. And I hope that the mahi that has started can continue over the next 3 years in the new triennium. So,
thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Winters.
Just I took on what Councillor Thompson has said. We took a bit of a punt 2 years ago, I think, by increasing the volunteer sector by 500k. Certainly paid off big time. The value for money return on investment is huge. So congratulations to staff for fully allocating those funds and the previous funds to that too. What I'd like to see, Mr. Chairman, is for the incoming council, for you now to put up budgets for the new council in terms of increasing those budgets significantly for volunteers. This is huge kudos to us. We can help in a small way in advice and support for these 78 land care groups across the region. So I'd like to see a range of options coming forward for the new long-term plan in terms of how can we significantly increase the budgets for this work, because we get the feedback, we get the love and the support. So I'd like to see that going forward too, Mr. Chairman. It's not a recommendation, it's just bring us back some options for next time.
Councillor Brunning.
Yes, I just echo the comments that have been made around the table, but put the challenge out that this is extended into the regulatory framework as well, so that communities become engaged on their own catchment or community basis, so that they become engaged and own. We have to write regulations at times that no one understands, and so our communities have to be involved. And I think I've already put the challenge out to Fiona privately to work on this type of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White and Councillor Clark.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou, mō koutou whakaaro mahi pai I tēnei rā. Kei te mea atu kia koutou. Yeah, I just want to support what Councillor Runnings has just said. And, because it always reminds me when we talk community, ia ha te mea nui o te ao mākui i atu. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is about people. And I like to think that's who we represent in the best way possible. And from my point of view, this community volunteering participation across the board is really essential to the life force, to the modi of this council. We don't have that. We have very little modi, in my view. So I just want to congratulate you on that. Community partnership, climate change, I know you've got to put those as highlighted, and engagement with iwi. I want to commend Kataraina, you and your team as well, for the progress you've made in the engagement field for our people, for our peoples, because I think, I've always said that we all rise with the tide if we pull everybody up. I want to also acknowledge yourself as well, Pim. Your quiet patience in some of the spaces you had to work with, making a connection with iwi in some of those spaces is to be commended. I said to you one time in a particular occasion, you're now a whānau of a particular group because you were told to just have patience for a while and things will be smooth once they understand what you can contribute and how you contribute and how you recognize that contribute in the people you work with. I just want to acknowledge you there. You've got the makatū history, you've got the waihi, wakapu, wahapu stuff. and you've exercised it with patience. And I just want to express that as work on the ground from some of our staff. And a big congratulations to you in the way you're working. It's the way forward. It's the way we should work. And you get the right response from our communities. So Stephanie, the team, ka nui te mihi kia koutou. Kia ora.
You, Councillor Clark, then Councillor Nees.
I'd like to tautoko all the comments of my fellow councillors and hope that is supported by the next triennium increase in funds, because as I commit myself to the political wilderness out there, I shall be wandering around with my 2 new spades in hand looking for projects. And if I can find a project, I just need to know where the funding source is. So I'm going to be good to you guys, be good to me and everybody out there. Yeah, put a bit more in the puttia in the pot. I'm looking forward to it. Kia ora.
Councillor Nees.
Well, thank you. I just want to recognise the transformative shift that you've made. I think it's a fabulous step forward. I do believe there is a lot more that we can do. I had a discussion last night with a commissioner for Tauranga City Council who's talking about a community panel that's doing work in the transport space over in Mount Maunganui. And in fact, that community panel is being resourced by council to contract work in to provide them with the resource to make recommendations back to council on what council could be doing in an area which has proven to be incredibly difficult to get agreement with the community. So I do believe that there's a lot more that we can do. What I would like to say though is that we must not leave people behind. And I'm just very conscious in our engagement that there still are a large number of people who are actively interested in council but are no longer able to access email and internet. So we must be always aware that we are serving a spectrum of the community and that we need to not put all our eggs in one basket, and that in some instances there is no substitute for face-to-face and other traditional mechanisms. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Iti.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kei te tautoko ngā mihi o te wā. Kia ora koutou. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. Actually, this triennium, I reflect to the Waihau Otara meeting that I had yesterday on myself and Councillor Clark and the Portuguese at the Portuguese Golf Club. And the kaupapa that we were talking about was really substantial with regards to flood mitigation in that area. And my thoughts was this golf club should be full to the brim of people. The impact on the community is huge. In terms of our engagement, there's so much that's outside of our control. I think it'll be reflected in the turnout of voters in this election. So certainly the challenge is substantial still to get our communities engaged in local government. And I look forward to working with all of you in the next triennium. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Councillor Iti. And if I can tautoko that comment, one thing that does worry me in terms of engagement is when some of my colleagues in the Eastern Bay say that when they turn up for the Waiweka Otara Forum that you and Bill attend to, they learn more about what's going on in their rohi than they do from their local council. So whether the responsibilities rest with us to have further dialogue with the council, but those meetings are really well appreciated in terms of the input that our staff and you two as elected members have there. Right, councillors, we have the resolution acceptance has been Pim.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask one question in relation to Councillor Winter's request for further information. Is that through the long-term plan or is that earlier through the long-term plan? Thank you.
Councillor Rose has moved it. We have a seconder. Councillor Thompson. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Takes us through to 9.7 Delegations Manual on page 260.
Move the recommendations, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Rose has seconded it. This matter has been through Risk and Assurance. It's really a procedural matter. Councillor Nees.
Just, I wasn't part of the work that was undertaken in risk and assurance, and I wasn't able to find the time to go through this delegations manual given the size of the agenda. And I guess I'm seeking some sort of assurance that these delegations have just been consolidated and that there are not major changes to existing delegations, either in scale or in scope, because it's quite hard just looking at it to see where the changes are. We haven't seen a tracked change version. So, for example, are any of the inclusions and exclusions in Appendix 1 different from what have been existing previously? If I could have some assurance on that, please, before I vote on accepting these.
You, Councillor Nees. In the first instance, Councillor Love, and then Miss Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We of course did have a delegation policy before. It was just not all in one place, and it was untidy. And this is just a procedural matter to bring all those things, all those delegations together under one heading. I think it makes it better from the audit point of view to have that done. And I just urge the council to accept this as just a procedural matter to make sure we pass on to the incoming council a consolidated piece of work. Now, the opportunity is going to be given to the new council and to the new incoming risk and assurance committee, and then on to the council to review this in entirety. And I would suggest that any work which needs to be done is undertaken at that stage. And for the moment, we just pass on at this very late stage of this triennium a piece of work which I believe is fit for purpose, and go ahead with it. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, then I'll come back to Councillor Nees.
So in answer to Councillor Nees' question, just to build on what Councillor Love has said, there's also some new regulations and legislations happening all the time. So as well as consolidating, as Councillor Love said, previous delegations that have been in different reports all into one policy, there are some inclusions and additions where legislations or regulations have changed. So it is now comprehensive and right up to date. I think that's why we're bringing it now, and why we're seeking council approval at the end of the triennium. And it will also be, as Councillor Love said, brought to the new triennium every triennium from now on. So that will be our standard process, probably at your December meeting.
So just to confirm, there have been no increase in the monetary delegations?
No increase in the monetary delegations, correct.
Maybe Councillor Nees. Okay, thank you. The recommend Councillor Winters.
Just on number 7, Mr. Chairman, transferring the delegations to Reuben. This is the likes of support for the warrants for the maritime patrol officers right across the region. So is this in compliance with the Maritime Transport Act? Because I always thought it had to be CEO. Okay, we're transferring the delegation to Reuben, but can we do it under the Maritime Transport Act?
Through you, Chair. So I believe for honorary enforcement officers, they need to be appointed by CE. I can't recall, but I can check whether it also applies to enforcement officers. But the power has always sat, well, in recent times, has sat with the General Manager of Regulatory Services for general appointments.
Yeah, I'm talking about the honorary patrol officers that are contracted every summer.
No, they must be appointed by the CE, and we have a memo in place that is rolled out.
That's a confusing, but yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. So it's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 9.8, page 268, Rangataiki Flood Protection Scheme, Stage 6. We have got Mr. Engel and Neroy. Oh, it's Mark on Zoom, is he?
Yeah.
Kia ora, councillors. As you'll be aware, Rangataiki Floodway multi-stage project. Oh, kia ora, Mark. Mark's zooming in from a river, New Zealand Rivers Forum meeting in Christchurch, I think. But yes, we wanted to report back to you on progress with the Rangitoiki floodway. They have, as you've probably read in the report, there have been some cost overruns that were unavoidable for completing stage 6, and therefore we've had to come back to you for some additional resource this year to complete the gates. Nero is the project manager for this, so he can answer any questions of detail. It has been reported to the Rangitoiki advisory group meeting as well, so Councillor Clark is aware of the commentary around that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take it as read, councillors. Any questions? Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to hear what the River Scheme Advisory Group feels about having an additional 900,000 debt added to this scheme.
So just before you answer that, Mr. Clark, some earlier discussions that I had, if you read the report on page 269, this is not the end of a capital application in terms of the cost to complete this program. Mr. Ingle might, or Neroy might like to comment on that, but my initial advice is that in the future, probably the next the next year, to do the spillway construction, once they get an engineer's estimate, we're talking millions, not hundreds of thousands. Is that right?
In terms of the final stage, which is the spillway into the floodway.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Mark's got any comments on that. I understand we haven't got the estimates in yet, so that would be something still to come. But I also understand that the funding from Kānoa may offset some of those costs. So there's an extra potentially $1 million there that will, so it's not necessarily going to fall on the ratepayers for that one.
The point I was making, though, was that the original cost estimates for completing the whole program of work that we had are going to be overshot.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark, can you answer Councillor Nees's question, please?
Yes, and thank you very much for being so observant around the space. Thank you, Councillor, because yes, we did socialise that in our last River Groups meeting, and there was, I think, because we're still in that post-2017 mood, it's let's get the bloody thing finished. Currently, some of the major shareholders in the scheme are the farmers who are not having a bad year. So, I mean, there's a kind of an acceptance that, yeah, let's get it over and get out of our hair. We've done extraordinarily well on that scheme because I think we've had $20 million worth of government assistance on it without, admittedly, the debt now is pushing 40 million, which is actually worrying, and affordability is an issue in there. But there was a consensus at the River Advisory Group that let's get it over and done with and take the hit. So, but thank you very much, Councillor.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, question. What was the level of contingency provided in the approved budgets?
Chairman. So we initially start with our preliminary design phase, and it's around that 30%. But when we drop down into the detailed design, our final process before we look to provide our budget, we're around 10% plus a budget of project management included in that as well.
%10 on the final costings.
Which is about how many million?
Yes, so the spillway itself, we're still going through that detailed design costing at the moment. I guess in general, we are seeing over the last 12 months a rise in construction costs. I understand it's potentially between 15 and 20% in cost increases, say, for example, concrete. So, yeah, it'll be added onto that final estimate for construction, that 10% value.
So, excuse my ignorance, but on page 271, stage 6, what are you referring to when you say first gas section?
Yes, Chairman. So there's a section of stop bank, the left stop bank on stage 6, which has a first gas line running underneath it. And so essentially it's quite complicated to get through that process with First Gas. They've got a lot of health and safety issues that we've got to manage. But we're in a position now to be able to go and talk to them, to be able to construct what we need to construct. And it's just essentially widening the stop bank footprint over that gas line with their standover.
So essentially, that's the body that's now, it used to be the reticulated gas line that ran through to Gisborne, right?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. White.
Yes, just listening to, Councillor Neese comments around a current 900,000, whatever it is, cost overrun. And what we're talking about now, just to get it clear, we're talking about a significant overrun added to this. Is that what we're talking about in terms of the engineering estimates coming in?
So before you answer that, Leroy, we're talking about two different things. So you're talking about the gates here.
Okay.
Stage 6, the spillway is the one that I was referring to of a significant increase in terms of estimated costs. Sorry, Leroy, you answer.
Nothing else to add to that.
Thank you.
Comment too, for those that are sort of half in the loop, the swing gates were referred to in here are not actually the swing gates at the top by where it goes into Reed Canal, are they?
No.
So I mean, they're a separate issue again. So I mean, that is quite concerning that 770 grand's in that space. But so yeah, just so council is aware of that.
And just to clarify, Mr. Engel, is Bill right that this scheme's got $40 million worth of debt on it? I know it's significant.
Yes, I understand that's it's close to that now, and this will tip it into 40. I believe it's in the report under financial implications.
Okay, any further questions, councillors? Yes, Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to basically do a little bit of a summary comment. So just talking about the Stage 6 project, which is what this paper is of course about. So this Stage 6 project was in fact 3 separate sections of stop bank that we did, which was just over 10.9 million. So I just really want to acknowledge Neroy's and Neroy's team's work here, because this is pretty trying circumstances that we've been working in over the last couple of years, obviously with COVID, with lack of resources as far as contractors and consultants, lack of materials, and a little bit of resistance from our local council, which we didn't get into too much as far as the paper is concerned. So I mean, in my opinion, and I acknowledge that this is my opinion, to only have an overspend of this amount on that size project, given the amount of difficulties we went through, is pretty dangerous. And when we went through that with the advisory group, just as Councillor Clark said, they hardly batted an eyelid. They thought, okay, yep, that's just what's going on at present. Get on with it, guys. Proceed to the next stage.
Councillor Neese, then Councillor Eatey.
Oh, just one question. Given the increasing cost of debt, the increase in interest rates, does that mean that we're also putting up the interest rates for all our river schemes and commensurate with what we are experiencing in the market for our own debt?
I understood from my financial wizard behind me that the interest rates are locked in at the moment, but I'll let him answer that.
So under treasury management approach, all loans are covered by interest swaps. So that gives council pricing certainty for the foreseeable future. So that would fall under the interest swap arrangement.
Oh, that's great. So they've got some sort of insulation there from increased costs. One thing I'd like to see in the future, Mr. Chair, is a snapshot which shows how much we estimated for the work and how many times we've actually had to increase the budget for it, because it seems like every stage has had a request for additional budget. It would be quite good to see that progression from what we thought we were signing into when the work was done to now what we are expecting it to cost council, and how that's changed over the period of the project.
Thank you, Councillor Neese, and Mr. Engel has referred to it. So I think, as a comparator, if this was a private entity delivering this, Issues such as the 127,000 to WDC would probably be rebutted. But for the sake of getting this done and maintaining a relationship, it's something the staff have obviously put on the table as being accommodating.
Could I make a comment in this space too, just regarding the Rangitai catchment? There's been a significant change in value in that catchment, particularly over the last 3 years, with massive investment in kiwi fruit. So the capital value of that catchment has gone up enormously. That should be reflected in its rate base, but also the necessity to protect all that capital value there. It's going to become an enormous income earner for the district over the year, and that's been a big shift that's probably not been acknowledged at this table. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillors, anything else? Councillor Iti.
I just wanted to let you know, Councillor Nees, that in terms of the interest rate stability over the term of the loan has been socialised with the advisory group too. So that was explained to them. I mean, they're quite a practical bunch that are there. There was some who were advocating that they should increase the rate of payments to knock it out so that they saved on some of the interest rates. So we had to explain to them, actually, we have to spread it out over generations to a certain extent, and other farmers wanted to pay off the farm first. Yeah. But I did have a question with regards to the River Scheme Sustainability Report and when the next one is due for that particular scheme.
I think there was a RSS report to the last Monitoring and Ops Committee, so I'm not sure when the next one would be due. But we tend to update each River Scheme Advisory Group on the fly. So every meeting there'll be a short update from Mark on progress there. But I think with Rangataiki, with the completion of the floodway and spillway, that will future-proof that catchment for the next, I'm guessing here, but at least 20 years. Mark will correct me if I'm wrong there. Yep, I'm right.
Thumbs up. Heavy. Right, thank you, councillors. Has it been moved and seconded? No? Oh yeah, can we have a mover, seconder? Councillor Iti, Councillor Clark, all those in favour say aye. Against, carried. 9.9 procurement plan for rivers and drainage. So, Leroy, you're in place.
Well, this is the standard procurement plan, Mr. Chairman, that we present every year for every capital item that exceeds the Chief Executive's delegation. We bring a paper just asking that she be delegated to authorise payments in accordance with the plan that's attached here.
I'll move. Seconded, Councillor Winters. Any discussion? If not, all those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Kirsty Brown, Infrastructure Insurance Renewal.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Morning, Council. Oh.
Yes, carry on.
The purpose of this report is to obtain financial delegation for the Chief Executive to approve and pay the annual premium for our infrastructure insurance due 1st of November.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Thompson, seconded Councillor Thurston. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Right, do you approve Peppermire Hills Cultural Heritage Regional Park? Ms Tatton.
Nakoto katoa. I've been working with the informal advisory group to look at putting more structure around the meetings and the structure they've been having, and that provided an opportunity for members to look at how they wish to go moving forward. And there are some members here who are part of that. They may wish to speak to it, but basically what we're presenting and what members of Te Upu have signed off is terms of reference for them, for that group going forward. There's been a change in the way that they are now working together, and they've incorporated, as you see in the terms of reference, there's been agreement
among the members to incorporate the not only the governance side of the work that they've been doing, but also to bring in some monitoring and financial responsibilities to that group as well. That's just an overview. There may be members here who wish to speak to that as well.
Thank you, Yvonne. Councillor Nees.
I just wanted to comment that this group is working really well, and there's a lot of goodwill and willingness to work together well and deliver really positive outcomes for Papamoa Hills Cultural Heritage Park. So there's a real willingness to operate in a consensus manner, and an acceptance, I guess, almost that this co-governance entity is coming of age, and so therefore the terms of reference are relevant. So I totally support them.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. So you'll move accordingly. Thank you. Councillor Brunning, second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour say aye. Against? Thank you. Carried. 9.12, end of triennium matters. Yvonne.
Kia ora, councillors. So this just provides the information for you as we wind up this triennium, the 2019 to 22 triennium, and it just provides administrative matters for you to be aware of through that process. There is one change that I do need to bring your attention to, and we will be communicating to all candidates that we have had to change the date of the inaugural meeting, which will be held on the morning of the 19th of October as opposed to the 20th, the afternoon of the 20th of October. And that was due to some miscommunication or with the venue that we were holding, that we were wishing to hold it at. So we have had to change that date.
Councillor Winters, and then
I just want to know what recommendation 2 means, resolve to not discharge. What does that mean?
Oh, sorry. That's a mistake. How on earth did that creep in? Oh, sorry. You know, sorry, as part of the end of year triennium, all of the committees, unless they are directed under legislation not to do so. So that includes all the co-governance committees that we have, and some of the joint committees are not discharged, but all of council's committees, the standing committees, any subcommittees, etc., are discharged. So there are no committees in this triennium that do not require you to not just discharge. So sorry, that's my mistake, that sentence has crept in there. All your committees of council will be discharged or basically disestablished, and then they will be re-established under the new governance structure by the new council, unless they are deemed not to be discharged, for example, CDM, etc., and that is by legislation.
So can we just clarify what that resolution's meaning?
And you can take that out.
Would it be helpful to simply have a notice that the following legislative committees will not be discharged?
So that's 2.3 on page 300. Yep.
If you so wish.
Do that, please.
Thank you, councillors. So can we have a mover and a seconder? Move Councillor Rose. Councillor Crosby. No further discussion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Local Government Funding Agency, Kumaran.
So this report, councillors, essentially gives you an update on the financial and non-financial performance of the LGFA for the end of 30 June 22. Key highlights on the report is essentially the company achieving all but 2 of its 10 performance targets. In addition to that, it's managed to launch a new green, social and sustainable loan product to the sector, and also establishing a future director program to help grow governance capability within the sector. That was launched at 1 July this year with a successful appointee, Anita Furness, now appointed to the position as a future director, essentially as a development opportunity. The other key achievement for the company is increasing its shareholder base to 75 out of the 78 councils in the country, so having quite a sizable share of the local government sector in terms of its lending book. So those are the key highlights. In terms of financial performance, the dividend declared from prior years is up to 1.2 million, while the net operating profits are slightly down from last year in response to fluctuating market conditions, but overall very strong financial performance from the company.
Thank you, Kumar. And Councillor Winters.
Just last line on the executive summary. What's a targeted issuance?
So that's the pricing for the bond issuance that they need to secure from investors. So essentially, the target issuance price that they had envisaged as part of the statement of intent was higher than what they had budgeted for. Hence, that's factored into the performance target not being met. This has happened in the past, and it's just a nature of the business that the company has to deal with in terms of assumptions versus actual market conditions.
Right, no further questions?
Moved.
Councillor moved. Seconded, Councillor Thompson. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Right, councillors, just before that brings us to the end of the open section, but just before we move into the public excluded, at which the press will leave, I think it's appropriate that we give those retiring councillors the opportunity to make some valedictory comments if they so wish. So, first one I'll go to is Councillor Brunning.
Wonder whether I should stand. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yeah, just to say a final farewell as a councillor to my constituency and to the Bay of Plenty. It's been an interesting journey. I started in local government in 1989 at the conclusion of the reorganisation, which was an exciting time because we were dispensing with old guard and old constituencies of county councils and boroughs and into what became the Western Bay Plenty District Council. And of course, it was the beginning of a time of great growth. And as a Western Bay District Councillor, we were involved in providing infrastructure for the growth that was coming, that has come, and the infrastructure is in place to accept that growth in most of those areas. And I'm talking about stormwater, sewerage, and fresh water. So it was an interesting time. It was not always an easy time, but with good staff and fellow councillors, I found the hardest people to move were fellow councillors, because I could see the need for what we were doing. And there were times when we had to, we were going for bore water across the district as our fresh water supply. And the staff would come along. We want to drill 3 bores in Whakamarama, and no, let's see if there's anything there first. So we had to drill them one at a time. But that was interesting. We got there. From my career point of view, after 6 terms there at Bay Plenty
Western Bay District Council. I then came to the Regional Council and have done 3 terms here. And that's just been a progression in thought and learning, that you gain more information than probably you can contribute. But that's the way when you put your heart and soul into it. And so the first term, due to circumstances, Doug asked me to go and do quite a bit of work in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. And so I learned a lot about the Eastern Bay of Plenty and appreciate it. The second term was working with the incentive scheme in Rotorua, and learnt a lot more about Rotorua, and worked with Te Taru and Kevin at that time there. And then this last term, and which started beforehand, was the journey into the Kaimai Mamaku and the forming of the Manaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust. And forever grateful to this council for the appropriation of $1.5 million to, in one way, shame the government into saying you're not doing enough in the Kaimai Mamaku. And we looked at the likes of the Kumaras down the eastern end of the bay and the deterioration. We saw videos of what was happening down there, and that was going to happen in the Kaimai Mamakus if more work was not done to protect the Ngāhere. So that's through circumstances of COVID and the Jobs for Nature funding, we gained the $19 million, which has now been actually handed over to the trust to manage. And that's an unusual situation for a government to hand over by the Department of Conservation the funding now for us to administer. And of course, we have to be very responsible. And I'm fortunate to co-chair that, and it's an interesting time. We have very good CE in Louise Saunders, who some of you met last night. And so that's an exciting future, and I will continue to participate in that. So I'm not leaving. This is probably your first submission to the 2024-34 budget to continue your support of that project. There are a few things about this council that I do question, and one stems from central government and so much ideology-driven policy that's coming through there, which reflects in the work that we have to do here, that I think is not balanced. We do have the 4 well-beings, and that does include the economic. Now, the Bay has a tremendous future for food production, but it also has a tremendous future for growth in population, etc. So we do have to balance that out. But I think some of the ideology that's being driven around fresh water, which we have to do, I don't disagree, but we have to say we have to continue with our farming, our horticulture. We do have to continue with artificial fertilizers and nitrogen by a moderate way. There's better technologies, there's new science coming through, but do not stymie too much our capabilities in this area to help feed still a growing population in this world. And I do worry about some of the European paths they go down. Just look what's happened to Europe and Germany over energy coming from Russia. And, you know, we still have to have energy. We're not going to always be able to rely on the sun. You know, let's go down that path, but just balance it. There will be a place for fossil fuels for quite a time into the future. I'll just touch on public transport. And I can't help myself. Well, I've been on the bus twice this week. I had to bring a car into town, so I came down Cameron Road, and there were 13 people on that bus, so that was quite pleasing. And I had to then travel home to Mokoroa because the car wasn't ready, and there were 7 people going to Mokoroa. So that's encouraging. But and I've chosen not to say too much in the, but to aim for 20% is just plain wrong. We, in 2004, in setting up the Smart Growth document, were advised by professional advisors at that stage that if you get to 7%, you will do very well. And that's worldwide research. So just a touch of reality. The other thing that worries me there is that 40 million or whatever the figure is annually for public transport equates what we get out of Keysight Holdings a year. Now, where's the relativity or the even common sense in that? So I'm just saying there's going to have to be some rationalisation in the thinking around public transport. So I'm not going to complain too much, but it's been an interesting time, and the council going forward, whoever's around the table, will find it even more interesting and more challenging, and the world moving faster. We don't know what's coming out of this Korean War or what's even happening in Iran, but it all has an influence on us. Let's hope we are still able to export our food and so forth, and be the wealthy country that we are. We have social problems, but I think they can be woven into the work we do. And the reports we had earlier about enabling, and that's a word I use a lot too, Paula, enabling. If we can be an enabler to communities, it's not about us, it's about our communities, and enable them to do what they want to do, live their lives, whether it's economic, social, environment. Let the communities be the benefits of the work that we do. I want to finally thank my fellow councillors for your camaraderie and the times we've had together. I'd like to thank the management staff. They're all sitting over there. Thank you for your cooperation and the relationship I've had with you all. I've enjoyed it. And Fiona, relationship I have with you and the work that you do, I admire. And long may it all continue. So to all candidates, I wish them well, but only 14 of them will be selected. And so I will look forward to watching this council. I'm not going away. I just won't be sitting around the table. I will be watching you and watching this district as it develops further and further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll be formal, Councillor Clark, Bill Clark.
I may be less formal, sir. In view of preparation for this auspicious occasion, about 4 days ago, I sat down and turned my wordsmithing into a document that read extremely well and thought that'll do. And then I left it in the car, and my wife couldn't off to Pookie with the bloody thing. So there you go. So here we go. So this is a kind of a winging of it. You may or may not be aware, it took me 3 shots to get into this particular forum. But when I got in on the 3rd time, thanks to the blessing of Atua, I didn't realise what I actually had in store. I'd only been here a matter of months. The massive weather event in my village of Edgecombe was decimated. The river breached, and also the confidence of our community in this forum also breached. And then there was this period of restoration, not only to the structures on the river, but also around the social structures in that village. And there were some really interesting learnings here, I think, particularly in the context of climate change, how we react to people, how people react, and how actually over time with good planning and good consideration, which this council actually did very commendably. The township of Edgecombe is a happy little village now, and apropos Mark Townsend's comments before, I think they're actually feeling quite secure. So, I mean, that in itself was a real blessing and real learnings, particularly with what's ahead of us. The next thing I've got here is local body politics. And looking around this room, I realise actually being a local body politician is actually quite a skill set. Some people it comes very easily. I mean, I just noticed how well my associate Mr. Iti just slipped into the role like he was born to it, and perhaps he was, whereas I'm still struggling with my P's and Q's in certain spaces, as you may well know. But I commend you on all your skill and your tolerance of some of my confused antics over the years. There we go. Next one, we're moving on to minor obsessions. It's called whitebait and wallabies. I actually campaigned 6 years ago on establishing more whitebait habitat in the Bay of Plenty, because I just see that it's one of the magnificent, the best possible environmental win-wins. Create more whitebait habitat, more people catch more whitebait, then the tile improves, the whole thing there, and we've done it. And it's going forward. I'm really pleased to have actually taken some of the candidates who are standing over in our area around and say, look, that wasn't there when I started, that wasn't there. So, I mean, I claim the credit for the whole bloody lot. Didn't necessarily do it myself, but, you know, but if it fits. And also, I know there was a time when you guys, when I mentioned the big word, the wallaby word, and I saw eyes roll. I did. I'm not that old bushy bugger actually banging on about those things again. But in fact, regardless, and I can't take the kudos for it, but there's a lot less wallabies around now than it was when I started, and so I'll tick that box too, and that one, and it is indeed a fact. Couple of things I'd like to particularly acknowledge. My two Eastern Bay fellow councillors, Doug and Toy. Doug, you've been a magnificent chairman. I've learned a hell of a lot from you. I am in awe of your skill set and your work ethic. Toy, it's been a marvellous trip. I kind of see you as part of my council legacy. I mean, yes, that car blew out at the gate. One day you walked up my drive, and before you could walk out, I'd talk to you and your old man to say, stand for this forum, you'll be good at it. And here you go. And at that time, we'll judge that one there. So I'm claiming that one as well. But there are a couple of things that, we do have our disappointments, and I'm looking to you, Rotorua councillors, a little bit. I do remember, and with the support of Jane, about 4 years ago, say, hey, we should be looking like establishing a forest accumulating carbon credits. I had this vision of 100 hectare redwood forest on the edge of Rotorua, and the whole 9 yards, and I really believed in it, and I think both Lauren and Kevin did too. It would have been a marvellous thing. Carbon credits then were $22. Now they're 87. It would have been, yep. And I would love for that to go ahead. Not a great deal more. I have some rather annoying comment about stop picking on the farmers and get stuck into the townies. That's kind of, you know, compacting it. But I'm aware that as an environmental regulatory organisation, we actually have, with stick and carrot, moved our farmers into a space that they're going along. And yet the comments apropos public transport, which is actually contributing as much pollution into our area, we are not making any progress whatsoever. I don't know what the answer is, but the farmers have had a bit of stick. Maybe it's time the urban people got a bit of stick to actually encourage them to be more environmentally responsibility, but good luck with that. And all it remains for me to say is that Terrell, I have one of my ambitions in my 6 year here was to become proficient in Terrell, and I have failed, but not dismally. I am actually quite competent in the comprehension of Terrell. I've learnt a lot of Terrell, and really, I actually see Terrell as a national taonga that everybody should be embracing. It's part of our Kiwi identity. We may not see the total relevance across the wider society, but I think it's got an integral part in where we're going as New Zealanders. So on that, I would actually just like to finish with a waiata and te reo, if you don't mind. E tō mato ki te rangi, ia tapu tō ingoa, ia tai mai, tō ranga tiratanga, ke me tia tō he pai, ai ke ronga e tu whenua, ke rete ano,
ki tō te rangi. O mai te matau ai one e taro mama tō mō te neira. Mūreri o mato ara e mato o ki e murune e o te hongo e harahana ki a mato oe hoki mato e kawia ki a whakawaia. Engare whaka o rongi a mato e te keno. No, hoki te ranga te ratana, te kaha me te kororio. Okay, okay, okay. Oh, mene. Kia ora.
Oh, crap, maybe I should have gone.
And you better be
second
thinking about that Waihau at the end as well.
No, I was thinking about how Bill should come down south. Our kuya down south would love you for that. Bloody hell. No, look, I ain't gonna beat that. Sorry, but look, it's been a journey. I remember the night before deadline day on August 15th, 2019, sitting at home after working a 10-hour shift at the barber shop, being like, I don't want to run. And I got a call from a very good friend of mine at Intermediate, who remembers me at Intermediate as being someone who is very outspoken and someone who likes to have the odd debate, even if I'm destined to lose. And he went, "You're an idiot if you don't do it, and you're an idiot if you do it, because someone at your age doing it, whew, you're going to have fun." And so I put my name forward the next day on deadline day. Went over to Rotorua to plan up and talk to Mum about what it was going to consist of. And got a phone call at, I think it was 2:30 from Tone, who's sitting over there saying, "Congratulations, you've been elected unopposed." I will not repeat the words that came out of my mouth on that fine day, but started a journey that I will always look back on and go, well, it happened, and we have done everything we can to make sure that it was a journey I well enjoyed. Look, everyone knows I have a passion for young people, and something that I was adamant about when coming into council was to ensure that our rangatahi, that our rakatahi, but particularly our tamariki mokopuna, had an opportunity to have a voice around this table. And I hope that the mahi that we have done, not just myself, I'd love to commend, of course, Councillor Iti, Councillor Nees, for the mahi that you guys have helped me kind of guide through and really build on, so we can actually see our rakatahi across the motu, expressing their voice and expressing their desire to see Aote Taiao absolutely thrive. And of course, I want to thank staff as well for the mahi that you guys have done, particularly around youth engagement and community engagement. It has been a journey. It definitely was not an easy journey, and there were sacrifices that had to be made. Those sacrifices were made for the betterment of our rakatahi and the betterment for their voices to be heard. I really don't want to talk about public transport because it's been talked a lot today, but I want to firstly say thank you to Councillor von Dadelsen. You have been someone who I've been able to talk to about these issues. Whether we've agreed on it or not is another question, but it's been good to have someone to talk to about the issues of public transport, and the way you have chaired the Public Transport Committee has been excellent, to say the least. I'd also like to thank my fellow councillors on the PT Committee. We've had some excellent wins and we've had some very big challenges, notably in regards to security and in regards to getting people on our buses. Security is something I was always passionate about because I understood that a large majority of the issues fell down to rakatahi. And so to see our council look at the issue of security and to look at it from a different perspective and to look at it in a way that we can actually try and help our rakatahi rather than sitting there saying they need to be thrown in prison or whatever they would do, has made me so grateful. Because for me, I look at a lot of those rakatahi and I remember my days as being a 14, 15-year-old boy in Te Papaioe, Palmerston North, running around the square, causing grief, causing nightmares, and that was always fun. But I also learnt my lessons from that. And so learning those lessons and being able to transition those into this mahi has always been an exciting journey. Yes, there have been some interesting times, particularly in the past 12 months. And there are some regrets, 100%, as there always will be. I remember coming into the day after deadline day, realizing there's no way I can put my name forward anywhere. And I went, it's great, to the feeling of being able to say I can relax and move into a new space. But also knowing that my time as a councillor is coming to an end, and my time working around this table is coming to an end, was something I struggled with for a wee while and then got excited about as I continued to go home, back to our home marae in Kaukararata, in Port Levy, in Te Pātako Rākai Hautu Banks Peninsula. And the key statement that I took out of every time I've gone out there was actually this past weekend from my auntie Miri, who is yay high, very old, but if you don't listen to her, she's going to give you a clip around the ear. And those words were, you may miss the job, but you have a bigger job here. And that is to ensure that your tamariki and your mokopuna and the future of our whānau can thrive in the world that is going to be in the next 50 to 100 years. And so I stand here knowing that within the next, what's the time? 4 hours, I'll be on a flight back home to Ōtautahi. And I say kia kaha to all of you. I know that elections are never easy, though last time was a bit lucky on my front. I want to say thank you to all my councillors for making this an enjoyable 3 years. And Doug particularly, thank you for the counsel that you have given me over the past 3 years. There's going to be some missed times of breakfast and coffee and sitting there listening to me ramble on about all this stuff and you going, but you realise this is something. And I'm like, oh, well, I've just rambled for half an hour for no reason. So, look, thank you for the mahi that you've done as chair, and the time you've given myself to learn. But, of course, to our candidates, you have a tough job ahead of you. There are many reforms coming in. And I ask those candidates to remember that they are here for our communities and we need to ensure that our communities are at the first point of call when it comes to making some of these tough decisions as we move forward with a lot of these reforms. But of course, I want to thank Fiona. I must admit that pie was good last night. It was very nice. However, the mahi that you've done over the past 3 years has been nothing but extraordinary. And I must admit, I did wish we stopped off for a pie at the Matata Dairies, but we didn't get that opportunity. So that is the way it is. So with that, thank you. I will not be seeing your waiata. Sorry, Bill, you can claim that. And Bill, anytime you want to come to Kokorarata, feel free to. The aunties will love you. So nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa, kia ora.
Right, thank you, councillor.